Hey everybody, and welcome to part 11 of Science versus Atheism. In this part we are going to conclude all the objections. We'll start with objection number 11 and we'll go all the way through 15. These are rather brief. Creationist objection number 11. Quote, natural selection might explain microevolution, but it cannot explain the origin of new species and higher orders of life. Close quote. In precision, natural selection only deals with that portion of microevolution that is testable, not the non-scientific, untestable portion. Also, in precision, it can explain, but these explanations are necessarily philosophical because they lie outside the access of the testing required by the scientific method. Thus must be relegated to conjecture, not science. As noted previously, all such explanations are ad hoc and ex post facto, and usually in the presence of an agenda. What is implied is correct, however. That is, natural selection cannot be justified as a scientific theory in the context of macroevolution, since macroevolution is not a science. Thus, the explanations made in the name of natural selection do not justify their elevation to the status of science, and certainly not to the justification of calling them truths. McElligot's pool arguments are never satisfactory justifications for such elevations. As noted in his response, quote, evolutionary biologists have written extensively about how natural selection could produce new species, close quote. And the rest continues in this McElligot's pool direction. But note the lack of reference to any accessible, repeatable present-day laboratory results as required by the designation of science. It is an implicit admission as to the correctness of the underlying claims. Writing about how things could have happened is never a substitute for the required demonstration as to how they did happen, which demonstration is inaccessible, as is all past phenomena. Conjectures are never acceptable substitutes for the requirements of primary science. Pro hominem appeals to experts and publications and speculations notwithstanding. Creationist objection number 12. Quote, nobody has ever seen a new species evolve, close quote. His answer, quote, speciation is probably fairly rare and in many cases might take centuries, close quote. Here a blatant admission that the objection is correct, and it is, so why argue with it? Moreover, being correct, there can be no such claimed refutation. However, he continues, and as with previous discourse, wanders off into McElligot's pool again, with a series of possibilities and apparentlys, and other non sequiturs. Creationist objection number 13, quote, evolutionists cannot find any transitional fossil creatures that are half reptile and half bird, for example, close quote. His response, quote, actually, paleontologists know of many detailed examples of fossils intermediate in form between various taxonomic groups, close quote. Examples are given. This reply is actually the best one of the lot, but it is still, like all the others, fatally flawed. The groups indicated are simply categorizations made by the relative inside community for purposes of delineations within the discipline. The examples alluded to have not, nor can they be justified as transitional, even though said community so designates them. That is, it cannot be done by definition. To justify the designation of transitional as inferred by the objection requires that the claimed parent species, the species, and the claimed posterity species all be positively identified, and that identification be irrefutable. It takes little thought to realize that while one may conjecture in their own mind that such is the case, the actual justification is inaccessible. It would require positive observed present testimony, which is obviously not an option, or the elimination of any and all other possibilities as to the explanation, which is even more remote and inaccessible. There is a dream world that academics like to drift into, and this is an excellent example of such. The categorizations and arrangements and interpretations and sortings and pilings and associations and modelings and explanations and all such are the landscape, housing, gardens, walkways, furniture, scenery, etc. of this world. Those who dwell there too long and too often tend to lose their bearings as to which is the real world and which is not. It becomes easier to live in this dream world at times because the solutions to its problems, as well as the problems themselves, tend to be oversimplified and carry no innate real-world responsibilities. But dream world it is, of great value when it comes to the scientific method, but, as indicated, otherwise potentially very dangerous if one chooses to put their mental and emotional trust and devotion within it. As the reader may note, the hard and pertinent questions and distinctions of real life tend to be ignored or improperly translated into incorrect, but what appear to be parallel, contexts. Distinctions and complexities that the real world forces tend to vanish or simplify in the fantasy world. The hard and the demanding are somehow improperly translated into the easy and the convenient. To validate that an answer is the answer is difficult to impossible in the real world, but happens very simply and easily in the dream world. The problem with Mr. Rennie's responses is that they seem to come from the dream world, not the real world, even though it appears that he thinks they are from the real world. Note that all models of the sciences are from this dream world. The scientific method is the only known trustworthy link between the dream world and the real world, but even that is tenuous and must be dealt with properly and with care and awareness. As for the conjectures of the anti-theists, there is no such link, even though they feign claim it, and they drift wherever they will in the vast dark void of postmodernism. Creationist objection number 14. Quote, living things have fantastically intricate features at the anatomical, cellular, and molecular levels that could not function if they were less complex or sophisticated. The only prudent conclusion is that they are the product of intelligent design, not evolution. Close quote. And creationist objection number 15. Quote, recent discoveries prove that even at the microscopic level, life has a quality of complexity that could not have come through evolution. Close quote. As with previous claims, if these are really creationist arguments, they are very poor ones from the platform of what we really know as distinguished from what we think we know. The author's response is as weak as these claims themselves. As noted before, we cannot access the information as to just how complex or how simple things must or can be in order to function at any level, much less what any resulting causes and or effects may be. The creationist argument that they must be as they are is, from the basis of logic and reason, circular. The evolutionist claim that they are what they are from the basis of macroevolution is non-scientific and non-testable, and their answers are thus, even though from a different platform, as speculative as those of the creationists. For these two objections and answers, the result is a draw, since the accurate answers are from outside the considerations and externally available tools of both sides specifically and mortal man generally. It is noteworthy that these positions are in reality unnecessary for the religious belief of either side. The author's responses appeal to McElligott-Poole's arguments, references to Darwin and other evolutionists and their philosophical conjectures, non sequitur claimed parallels, and, as pertains to basic substance, irrelevancies. Now that concludes my father's responses to the author's responses to the 15 creationist objections, and in the following we will conclude with my father's response to the closing statements of the article. Thank you for listening.